My name is Rose Peter. Most people call me Rose. I'm 33, an operations analyst by title, but in my family, my real job has always been the fixer. I'm the one who smooths over arguments, books the trips, covers the missing amounts, and makes sure everyone else gets to enjoy themselves. That Sunday, I thought lunch would be like any other. Mild chaos, overlapping chatter, my mom refilling water glasses every 5 minutes, and me calculating how much the check would be before it even hit the table. But I was wrong. We'd just finished dessert when my sister Claire leaned back in her chair, swirling her mimosa. She looked straight at me and said, almost playfully, "Just don't come next week, okay? It'll ruin the vibe." At first, I thought she was joking. I laughed, too loudly, and looked around the table for support. My mom's smile faltered, then she turned her face away, pretending to check her phone. My dad cleared his throat but didn't say a word. No one said anything. I could feel the air leave the room. My fingers went cold. "Excuse me?" I said finally. Claire shrugged, eyes already back on her drink. "It's just, you know how you get. The itinerary, the schedules, the spreadsheets. We want this one to be relaxed." "Relaxed," I repeated. My voice sounded calm, almost detached, but inside my pulse was hammering. Eric, my brother, tried to deflect. "Come on, Claire, don't start." But she just smirked. "It's fine, she can take it." I looked at my parents again. Nothing. Not even a token. "Come on, Claire." My dad didn't even flinch. My mom kept staring at her plate like it had suddenly become fascinating. So I smiled, not because I was fine, but because that's what I always do when they cross a line. If I got angry, I'd be dramatic. If I defended myself, I'd be overreacting. But if I smiled, they could pretend it didn't hurt. I picked up my fork, took one last bite of cheesecake, and said softly, "Sure, whatever makes it easier." They thought that was the end of it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd planned the entire family vacation, an 8-day Mediterranean trip I'd spent weeks researching. I'd negotiated group rates, handled bookings, and even paid deposits on my own card. On the laptop screen, all the tabs were still open. Group tour confirmation, cooking class booking, vineyard excursion, villa deposit, travel insurance policy under my name. Every single one. I stared at the itinerary spreadsheet I'd built, the color-coded masterpiece that no one had ever thanked me for, and felt something shift inside me. If I'm ruining the vibe, let's make sure they get to feel it fully. I started with the group tour. One click, canceled. Then the cooking class, refund requested. Then the villa booking, the same one Eric begged for because he didn't want the kids cramped. Refund processed to my card. Finally, the joint travel card I'd opened so they could avoid international fees. I froze it. It took 10 minutes. 10 minutes to undo months of invisible labor. When I was done, I sat back, staring at my reflection in the dark screen. My face looked calm, but my hands were shaking. It wasn't rage, it was release. I whispered into the quiet. "You wanted relaxed? You got it." Around midnight, Ethan, my boyfriend, called. His voice was the gentle kind that always made me unclench. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just cleaning up some travel stuff." He paused. "Rose, you sound like you're about to go to war." I gave a small laugh. "Maybe I am." He didn't press. He never did. That's what I loved about him. He trusted me to handle my storms. But before hanging up, he said something that stuck with me. "You don't have to keep proving you're the responsible one." I sat in silence long after the call ended, because that was the problem. Somewhere along the way, I'd confused responsibility with love. The next morning, I woke to 3 missed calls from my dad and one from an unknown number. Then Eric's message appeared. "We can't board. What did you do?" I stared at the text, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed a single line. "Enjoy the vibe." I hit send and placed my phone face down. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the fridge. I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the early sunlight crawl across the floorboards. For once, I didn't feel guilty, just hollow, in a strangely peaceful way. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't about a canceled trip. It never was. It was about every time they'd let me pay, every time they'd let me fix things, and every time they'd made me believe that was love. And maybe this was the only way they'd ever see what it cost me. The messages kept coming. First from Mom. "Claire's upset. The kids are exhausted. Can you please call me?" Then another from Dad. "We're stuck here, Rose. This isn't funny." Funny. That word made me laugh out loud. Sharp, short, and bitter. It wasn't funny when they used my credit card. It wasn't funny when they turned me into their emergency fund. But now that the safety net was gone, suddenly I was the joke. I didn't reply. I didn't even open the group chat. I just set my phone to silent, poured another cup of coffee, and stared at the empty chair across the table. It felt strange, peaceful, like silence was finally something I owned. They must have realized by now that without me, the entire trip would crumble. The tours, the villa, even the travel insurance, all registered under my name. No authorization, no entry. While they scrambled, I took my time making breakfast. Toast, eggs, the smell of coffee filling the room. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to fix anything. As I ate, memories came back in flashes, a highlight reel of every quiet sacrifice I'd made for them. The time I paid Eric's rent because his credit score was a work in progress. The time Mom forgot her card at the grocery store and just smiled when I covered the $400 total. The time Claire upgraded her flight by accident, assuming I'd sorted out. And of course, every "we'll pay you back" that vanished into thin air. I'd told myself for years that it was love, that families just helped each other. But this wasn't help. It was dependence disguised as affection. I wasn't their sister, I was their sponsor. By noon, I'd finished cleaning my apartment. The air was light. No calls, no demands, no guilt trips. Then, out of habit, I opened Instagram. There it was, a single photo on Claire's story. Her kids by a hotel pool. Caption, "Making the best of it." No tags, no location, no "wish you were here." It looked like a funeral with palm trees. I couldn't help smiling, not out of spite, but relief. They were finally living a version of family that didn't rely on me to hold it together. That evening, Ethan dropped by after work, bringing takeout and a bottle of wine. He glanced at my phone lighting up across the room. "Still ringing?" "Constantly," I said. "They'll stop eventually." He handed me a glass, sat across from me, and asked quietly, "How do you feel?" "Free," I said before I could stop myself, then softer. "Scared, but free." Ethan nodded. You know, silence can be its own kind of answer. He was right. For years, I filled the silence for them. Explanations, apologies, solutions. Now it was their turn to sit in it. The next day, no new messages. Just an eerie stillness. I imagined them in Florida. The backup trip. 2 rooms, basic buffet, no excursions. No vineyard tours. No cooking class. No Rose. I pictured Mom trying to make small talk while Claire scrolled her phone, Eric pretending to have it all under control, Dad sipping watered-down beer by the pool, all of them pretending it wasn't falling apart. And for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for their discomfort. By Thursday, I'd almost gotten used to the quiet. I went to the gym, worked late, and came home to an apartment that actually felt like mine. No one asking me for wire transfers, no one saying, "Could you just cover this one thing?" But peace doesn't last long in families like mine. Friday night, as I was halfway through a movie, my phone buzzed. Not a call, but the building intercom. The sound was sharp, insistent. I frowned. No deliveries were expected. The buzzer went off again, and again. Finally, I picked up. "Hello?" A familiar voice came through, low and tense. "Open the door, Rose." It was Eric. For a moment, I just stood there, the last person I wanted to see. "Eric," I said slowly, "it's late. I just need to talk." Something in his tone told me this wouldn't be a calm conversation. Still, I buzzed him in. The hallway footsteps grew louder until he appeared at my door, red-faced, restless, carrying the kind of fury that comes from humiliation. He didn't even wait for an invitation. He walked straight in, stopping in the middle of my living room. No hello, no small talk. "You seriously messed everything up." I crossed my arms. "Good evening to you too." "This isn't a joke, Rose. Claire's furious, Mom's crying, Dad's humiliated." "And you?" I interrupted. "Are you humiliated or just inconvenienced?" He blinked, caught off guard. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means for once I'm not paying to keep everyone comfortable." He scoffed. "You didn't have to go nuclear. One comment and you—" "One comment?" I repeated, my voice suddenly sharper. "That wasn't one comment, Eric. That was years of comments. Years of silence from all of you." He opened his mouth to speak, but I wasn't finished. "When was the last time you paid your own rent?" That hit. His face tightened. "You're really throwing that in my face?" "Yes," I said simply. "Because for 2 years I've been paying it. $700 a month. You think I didn't notice when it never came back?" He stared at me, words failing him. Finally, he muttered, "I thought you didn't mind." "That's the problem," I said. "You all think I don't mind." The room went quiet. Then I added, steady and certain, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. Eric's jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my tone stopped him. He turned for the door. Tell Claire, I said as he left, that she got what she asked for. The door shut softly behind him. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the handle. Then I locked it and blocked his number. It was strange how something so small could feel like such a turning point. That soft click of the lock sounded like freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't their backup plan. The next morning, the apartment was unnervingly quiet. No buzzing phone, no guilt-laced messages, no desperate apologies pretending to be explanations. Just stillness. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching sunlight streak across the floor. A week ago, that silence would have felt like rejection. Now it felt like something else entirely. Space. For 7 days, I heard nothing from them. No calls, no texts, no posts. The family group chat sat there like a ghost town, our old digital scrapbook turned graveyard. I imagined what was happening behind the scenes. Claire ranting about me to Mom, Eric trying to make himself the victim, Dad staying silent, pretending it would all blow over. They were probably rewriting the story already. Rose overreacted. Rose made everything about money. Rose needs therapy. Maybe I did, but not for the reasons they thought. I needed to unlearn this reflex of holding everyone together. It was Sunday morning when my phone finally buzzed again. Not from Claire, not from Mom, from Dad. Let's talk, just you and me. I stared at it for a long time. The words were simple, but something about them was different. There was no guilt, no accusation, no manipulation. Just quiet. I typed back, "If you wanted to talk, come here." He replied almost instantly, "Be there in an hour." When he arrived, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked older, tired in a way I hadn't seen before. He was wearing the polo I'd given him for Christmas 2 years ago, tucked neatly into pressed jeans. It was his trying outfit. He stood awkwardly in my doorway for a moment. "Can I come in?" I nodded and stepped aside. He didn't bring anything. No peace offering, no coffee, no scripted apology. Just him, hands folded, eyes uncertain. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd canceled everything a week ago. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said quietly, "I didn't realize it had gone that far." I said nothing. "I thought you liked doing it. The organizing, the planning. You always seemed in control." I almost laughed, because I had to be. He nodded slowly. "I see that now." He looked down at his hands, then added, "We stopped asking if you were okay with any of it. That's on us." Something in my chest cracked open a little. I wasn't ready to forgive, but hearing him say it out loud mattered. Then he reached into his pocket and placed a folded piece of paper on the table. It wasn't a letter. It was a rent receipt. "For Eric," he said simply. "I paid it this month." I stared at it for a long time. My throat tightened, and I hated that it made me emotional. In our family, accountability had never been spoken, only implied and then forgotten. But this was tangible, a small physical proof that someone had finally picked up what I'd been carrying for years. Dad exhaled. "You shouldn't have had to take that on. I thought he'd sorted it out a long time ago." "He didn't," I said softly, "because no one made him." He nodded again, eyes low. "Then that's my mistake too." When he stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. "I'm not expecting you to forgive us overnight. I just wanted you to know someone hears you now." That sentence hit harder than I expected. Someone hears you. After he left, I sat there alone with the rent receipt still on the table. It wasn't about the money. It was about recognition, about finally being seen. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe without bracing for the next demand. 2 days later, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Claire. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. She stood there holding a paper bag from my favorite deli, the one she always rolled her eyes at. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her voice small. "Can I come in?" I crossed my arms. "Why?" "Because I messed up." She stepped inside before I could reply, setting the bag on the counter. The smell of fresh bread and roasted turkey filled the kitchen. "I said awful things," she started, not looking at me. "Because I was overwhelmed, and you're the easiest target. You always take it." "Not anymore," I said. "I know." She reached into her purse and slid an envelope across the counter. "It's for you." Inside was a check, repayment for the last few trips. Not the full amount, but more than I ever thought she'd bother acknowledging. "I don't want my kids thinking family means free labor," she said quietly. I didn't trust my voice enough to answer. Claire continued, "Dad made us sit down and go over everything you'd done. The receipts, the bookings, the payments, all of it. We couldn't even finish the list." There was no sarcasm in her tone this time, no defensiveness, just tired truth. Before she left, she turned back at the door. "You were never the extra one, Rose. You were the glue. We just forgot to notice." The door closed softly behind her, and I sank into a chair. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a problem to be managed. I felt like a person being seen. That night, I opened the family group chat, the one that had been dead for over a week. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before I typed, "We need to talk, all of us, at my place. You'll listen first." Within minutes, replies started lighting up my screen. Eric, Mom, Claire, Dad, all agreeing, all coming. For once, not on their terms, on mine. They arrived early. That alone told me everything had changed. For as long as I could remember, family dinners started late, dragged on, and ended with me cleaning up what no one else wanted to deal with, literal and emotional messes alike. But that evening, they were all waiting outside my building before the clock even hit 7. Claire stood beside Dad, holding a casserole dish like some sort of peace treaty. Mom looked nervous, clutching her purse too tightly. Eric's expression was unreadable, part guilt, part defensiveness, part exhaustion. I opened the door without a word and stepped aside. "Come in," I said quietly. They filed in, settling around my kitchen table. The air felt thick, like even the walls were listening. No one touched the food. No one spoke first. Finally, I broke the silence. "I said you'd listen first, so please, let me finish before anyone interrupts." They nodded. I looked straight at them. For years, I told myself that paying for things was just how I showed love, that being the dependable one made me valuable. But all it did was teach you that I'd always be there to clean up your mistakes. No one moved. I paid for vacations, rent, flights, deposits, groceries, and every time you thanked me with silence. You assumed I didn't mind, and I let you believe it. That's on me. But what you did last week, that was different. Claire swallowed. "Rose, let me finish." She fell silent. "When you said, 'Don't come next week, it'll ruin the vibe,' you didn't just exclude me from a trip. You told me I wasn't really part of this family, at least not the part that mattered, and everyone here let it happen." Mom's lips trembled, but she didn't speak. I continued, "That's why I canceled everything. Not to punish you, but to finally show you what it feels like when I stop caring at all." The quiet that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. Then, to my surprise, Dad nodded. "You're right." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out that same folded rent receipt he'd brought days earlier, placing it in the middle of the table. "I paid Eric's rent this month," he said simply, "and I'll keep paying it until he gets back on his feet. It's not your job anymore." Eric's face flushed red. "Dad, you didn't have to—" "Yes, I did," Dad interrupted, "because I let her do it for too long." For a moment, Eric said nothing. Then he exhaled and whispered, "You're right." I didn't expect that. Then Mom finally spoke, her voice shaking. "I didn't realize how much we leaned on you until you stopped answering the phone. I told myself it was because you were stronger, but I think I just didn't want to look at what I was asking from you." She looked at me through tears. "I'm sorry, Rose." For the first time in years, I believed her. Then Claire cleared her throat and slid another envelope across the table. "I know it doesn't fix everything," she said softly, "but it's what I owe you for the last few trips, and the hotel upgrades, and the mess I caused." I glanced at it but didn't reach for it. "It's not about the money anymore." "I know," she said. "It's about respect." Something in me loosened. We sat there in silence for a while, all of us breathing the same air, but for once, not pretending. Eric broke it first. "You were right when you said we just assumed you'd never stop. We got used to it. I did." He looked up. "I paid my rent myself this month, full amount. You don't have to worry about it anymore." I felt a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with money. It was the warmth of relief. Dad looked around the table, then back at me. "We made you carry too much for too long. That's done now." I didn't cry, though I wanted to. I just nodded. As they stood to leave, Dad placed his hand gently on my shoulder. "You know," he said quietly, "your silence was the only thing that made us listen." And maybe that was true. For years, I'd spoken through actions, through bank transfers, bookings, and quiet fixes. But when I stopped moving, when I stopped paying, the noise of my absence finally got loud enough to hear. After they left, I stood alone in the doorway, looking at the rent receipt still on the table. A single piece of paper that had somehow become the symbol of everything I'd needed: recognition, responsibility, change. I folded it carefully and tucked it into a drawer, not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but proof of what I'd finally reclaimed. The next morning, I woke to a message in the group chat from Dad. We're proud of you. Dinner Sunday, your favorite place. No surprises. Then another from Claire. We'll be there early this time, I promise. For the first time in a long while, I smiled, without bitterness, without exhaustion. Because for the first time, they were showing up for me. Sunday evening came, and for once, I wasn't the one who reserved the table, called the restaurant, or reminded anyone of the time. They did it themselves. When I arrived, they were already there, early again. The change was subtle but unmistakable. They looked uncertain, attentive, almost humble. Mom stood as I approached. "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice was careful, like she didn't want to startle the moment. "Hi, Mom." We sat. No one reached for menus right away. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was just quiet. Natural. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Before we eat, there's something I want to say." I looked at him warily. He gestured to me. "You said we'd listen first, so we're listening." That small sentence, those 4 words, meant more than all the apologies in the world. I took a slow breath. "Okay." My hands trembled slightly under the table, but my voice stayed steady. "I love you all. That hasn't changed. But I can't be the family's safety net anymore. I can't be the automatic problem solver, the banker, the planner, the emotional sponge." No one interrupted. "I want to be part of this family, not the person who keeps it from collapsing. I want to be invited, not needed. Do you understand the difference?" Claire nodded, eyes glassy. "Yeah, we do." I looked around at all of them. "Good. Because next time something goes wrong, I'm not swooping in. You figure it out together. That's what real family is supposed to be." Eric looked down at his hands. "You're right. I got too comfortable letting you fix everything." Dad nodded. We all did. Mom reached for my hand. "You've always been the strong one. I think we mistook that for not needing care. We were wrong." I squeezed her hand gently. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but intent doesn't erase impact." No one argued. For once, there was no defensiveness, just listening. Dinner went quietly. No tension, no guilt. Just a family finally sitting together as equals. At the end of the meal, Dad reached into his jacket and pulled out a small manila folder. "Before we leave, there's something else." He slid it across the table. Inside was a deed amendment. My name had been added to the family cabin, our late grandfather's old property that I'd spent countless weekends repairing, painting, fixing gutters, while the others treated it like a vacation spot. I stared at it, confused. "Dad." He smiled, small but certain. "It's part yours now, not because you paid for it, but because you carried us." My throat tightened. I had no words, just tears pressing behind my eyes. Mom dabbed at her own. "You've always made things special, Rose. We're trying to catch up." Weeks passed. No dramatic outbursts, no sudden requests for money, just calm, unfamiliar peace. They took another trip in early June, a lake weekend. This time, they didn't ask me to plan it. I didn't go, but a photo popped up on my phone the second night. Claire's kids smiling by the water. Caption, "Missed you." I believed her. A few days later, Eric sent a screenshot. His rent paid in full, directly from his own account. Caption, "Took a second job. You were right." Then Dad called. "We're thinking about another family vacation this winter. No assumptions, equal shares. You in?" I smiled. "I'll think about it." He laughed. "Fair enough." 3 months later, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in Claire's handwriting. Inside was a handwritten card that said, "You always made things special. We're learning to do the same." Taped inside was a gift card to my favorite bookstore, the one I'd mentioned in passing years ago. I stood there in my kitchen, reading it twice, then a third time. It wasn't about the gift, it was about the thought, about being seen. That Sunday, Mom texted, "Dinner at our place, just us, no agenda." I went. Same house, same table, but everything felt different. No one joked about money. No one dismissed what I said. No one called me dramatic or overreacting. When dessert came, Dad lifted his glass. "To Rose," he said, "for teaching us that silence can be strength." I smiled, genuinely this time, because they finally understood. Later that night, I stood outside under the porch light, listening to the quiet hum of summer crickets. For years, I'd equated peace with absence, as if calm could only exist when I was alone. But now, standing there with laughter drifting faintly from inside, I realized peace wasn't isolation, it was balance. It was knowing I could love them without losing myself. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel used. I felt home.